The next talk is by Roland, and it's called Reproducible Builds Applied to Non-Compiler Output. Please give him a warm welcome.
Do I hear myself now? Yes. Good morning. So, I'm Roland. I have been involved with Debian since about 2003, I guess, when I booted up my first Knoppix CD. And for some reason, now that I think about it, Knoppix and the stuff that I'm doing currently is sort of related. But it's not conscious, it's just happened to be like that. So I've been involved in the reproducible build effort since a few years. I think around 2017 or 2018, I wrote to the mailing list, how do you as a Debian create live CDs? Because I want to make my own, the Debian way, with my own packages included. I got some answers, and then I looked at it and saw, that's depending on the package that is orphaned. So perhaps I need to use the other one, and I started to work on that. That turns out to be quite an adventure. So for me, what is a reproducible build? Let me annoy the video team by using my wireless mouse to point at things. A reproducible build is for me a bit-for-bit identical output. And Holger has talked about it a lot, and many other people have explained it all over what it is. For me, it means applying it, having something that is bit identical, and the primary tool to achieve that whole thing is rather easy nowadays. It's a single environment variable. If you set it, source.epoch, if you set it by the number of seconds since 1970, then all the magic happens automatically. And nowadays, since we are quite progressing in reproducible scenario, it just works for a whole lot of things, which is nice. And we want to thank really them for that. So let's take a short overview. I have made my slide totally non-technical. I don't think I put in any command line. I will tell them to you, but I will not show them. So what is the source? Yeah, that's even worse, right? So what are the source of binary stuff thingies? And the first of one, of course, everybody knows it. It's the executable generator. And then you have a documentation generator, which is sort of binary, but also humanly readable. And we have this new category, which I am currently interested in. It's images of any other kind. So for the quick overview for the people who do not know it, executables generated typically by the compiler, but even something which is using interpreted language like Python still generates some binaries like the Python cache files. They also have some interesting timestamp embedded in them. And then we have documentation generated typically with TechLive, Doxygen, and many other tools. So what is the problem within that? I think if you look back into the history, Holger and friends have all made many talks, and typically timestamps being embedded in your file, the build path embedded it, the user that created it, etc., etc. Random user IDs is also quite interesting. I had an example where I needed to fix that as well. So let me go forward towards what I am interested in, which is images that are generated. And I tried here to make a short overview of all kinds of images that are or will be distributed by Debian in some way or another. Some of these images, you know them, are available already in the Debian website, and you can download them. Some of them, like S-builds, are typically used by the developers themselves. They create an S-build environment and use that to test the packages with. And if you base an S-build image with SID, then you have something which might be interesting to make it reproducible at some time in some future. I focused on the fourth item, which is live images as created by LiveBuild, which is a tool which is rather old. It has a very good manual that is also packaged in Debian. There were some interesting things going on in the past which I don't know anything about, so I just took it and I saw that it worked for my purposes, so I used that. Who needs it? Who needs it? It meaning reproducible binary images. The answer is, well, strictly speaking, as an end user, you could care, but it's about the chain of trust. And we saw that earlier as well yesterday. If you want to have a complete chain of trust, every image that is provided needs to be reproducible in some way. But as a regular end user, I'm just happy that even the checksum, if that is matching, I'm fine with that. But we as infrastructure providers need to make sure that we are able to have something which is reproducible in the short to long run. Then let me explain a little bit what the LiveBuild tool does actually. So it has a few stages and all of them are written in shell scripting, so there is not a lot of magic going on. In theory, everybody should be able to modify stuff at will. So first we have to bootstrap into a change root. Then some packages are getting installed, perhaps tiny configuration, but for the live image the decision was made long ago to make this as pure to Debian out of the box as it is. So there is hardly, if any, tweaking going on at all. Then, after the packages have been configured, there are some minor tweaks going on to make sure that we reach the reproducible state. I will talk a little bit about that in a moment. Then we have this environment, we compress it, we place some nice stuff around it like UEFI images, Debian installers and whatever, and then finally we create an ISO image from that, which is a hybrid ISO, which means that you can use it as a hard disk image as well, untested by me since some time. So what is my work? What did I do in the past 4 years thereabouts in getting to the reproducible state? First of all, the very easy thing is set this environment variable, otherwise you cannot progress at all. Second step, use a snapshot server so that you know from which moment in time you're always generating your Debian packages from. And I used snapshot-debian.org a lot. And then at a certain moment of time, if you do a GNOME image, you need to download about 4 GB of packages, which is totally choking the snapshot service. I asked around a lot, and then it turned out that we now have this mirror by Verpetra and snapshot.notzetfr, and that hosts only the AMD64 versions. But it hosts exactly what I need, which is sufficient for my purposes. It allows me to use any moment in time after 2017. Before that, doesn't make sense for me to go back that far as well. So I can have exactly the state that Debian is from a specific moment in time. If I want to create a change root, there are of course shell scripts going on, some copies. I should not forget, when I do a copy of a file, that I keep the timestamps, otherwise everything is dated of the moment that I'm running my script instead of the moment that file was created and unmodified by me. And when everything is done, I apply a few hooks to fix it. For example, in the init RAM disk, there are occasionally fonts, and some time ago, the font config asked for a random globally unique identifier, and it was a truly random one. So I wrote an LD preload hook to catch that function, make it totally non-random in my personal way, and then I had a reproducible init RAM disk again. About half a year ago, Josh came in and he just made some really clever alternative, which is way better by using source epoch instead of some random string feeding the randomizer. So what do we have next? We have now our environments. The next stage is the Debian installer. The Debian installer is reproducible, but only if. Everything is, but only if. So I can use the Debian installer that is provided by Debian in the archives. One of the drawbacks is that in SID, the kernel version goes up on perhaps a weekly or monthly basis. And the nice people doing maintenance go into Git, increase the -2 to a -3, and then they might or might not do an upload to the archive providing the newly built Debian installer images. At least in Git everything is solved. Well, what I do is I said, I have a change root environment available anyways, so I do not need to pollute my home system. I use that and I check out the Git repository of the Debian installer up to the moment that I'm interested in my snapshot, so that I know that I will not get any newer developments while building an older snapshot. Then I do an auto detection of the kernel version. I'm inside the change root system, so I know exactly what version of the kernel is running in there. Apply that, also point to the snapshot, well, of course not debian.org at this moment, but not ZFR. Hopefully soon we will have the snapshot being throttle free, and then I will point it back to the official Debian one. And then finally I'm able to build the initial RAM disk with the associated kernel module by myself inside this whole installer preparation step. And that is done. Yay, I have a reproducible installer because it's only these two files. That's easily manageable. Then next stage, what do we have? We have a nice installer on it. We place binary stuff around it, like all the deps and the UDEPs that are needed for running the installer. We place a little bit wavy images on it, and finally we build the ISO image from that. All the while also preserving timestamps. What happened about preserving timestamps in a few steps before? While building the change root, well, I didn't need to do so because it's a nice feature of the ISO builder nowadays that if the environment variable source date epoch is set, it already truncates all timestamps that are newer to source date epoch. So I don't need to do a lot of touching files and making sure that all the timestamps are correct. I only needed to do it rather conservatively, only near the end of the whole system, which is easy and nice. So where are we nowadays? I somehow managed to convince Holger to use Jenkins to do reproducible tests. Well, it didn't take a lot of effort because he's convinced that it should be used by Jenkins as well. So that's easy. I'm building now 9 desktop variants. I call them desktops because there are also some text desktops involved. I build them on 3 versions of Debian: unstable, testing, and stable. And the answer is, yay, we are reproducible. It worked. Really? Really? Jein, as is the nice German word for that. There's always a jein going on here. For text desktop environments and for GNOME and KDE, I really need to do 0 modifications in my live building script for Bookworm and SID to make it work. For Cinnamon, I need to apply 3 hacks. 2 of them are already reported as a bug report in Debian, and they have a patch, but are waiting for approval of the TechLive managers, and TechLive is somewhat special in the subject of reproducible builds. As everybody knows, you do not need only source date epoch, but you need also for source date equals 1, and only then you will get reproducible PDFs. That's the way it works. It's ongoing. I have a good feeling that I will manage to get my stuff in soonish, and then we are really at one hook left for Cinnamon, and soon they will have a package change, and every work I did is not necessary anymore because they don't require TechLive included anymore. So yes, we are there, and we are at a state that it can be enforced and stay enforced. So that's really, really nice nowadays. So what's the next stage? We had a brainstorming session yesterday, and I had many talks with a lot of people regarding live images and Debian, and I got so many ideas. I need some time off now to think and collate them and make some nice overview of the path towards the future. One thing that works for me is, let's change this running system. It's working fine, and there are many improvements pending, and we can use that. Why not? So let's do that. Also, one of the next stages, Philip was pointing to me, I'm pointing back to him now. It's nice if we are able to have reproducible images and live images, but of course they must work, and they must work in a way that any user can use it. So it's, if you have a GNOME environment, for example, and it has LibreOffice included and a few other tools as well, it would be nice if you can give it to your grandmother and say, Grandma, please plug in this thing. It will not destroy your computer, but you will have a working environment and you can do anything in that. To ensure that, we can use, for example, OpenQA to make all these kinds of tests and help the Debian CD team in reducing their effort while testing. But because as I understood it, nowadays they have lots of machines and they go and boot everyone and test everything. If QEMU does a lot of testing beforehand and you find it on a daily basis while a new package is being uploaded in SID, that saves you a lot of stress during release time. So I'm really up for having the scenario, we test for reproducibility, we test for functionality, and only then will Debian publish the image, and not before that. Let's see. Also, at this current state, live images for SID and Bookworm are not generated for Debian at the moment, because one of the packages that are currently used for creating live images is orphaned and has an auto removal mail, not one of the gazillions, but a true auto removal mail pending, and it will be removed from testing really soon due to Python 2 to 3 and other migrations. So I will contact the Debian CD team soon, within the next month or so, and hopefully arrange to have at least a small subset of all the live images being running again and available on a daily or weekly basis. And that is the current state that we have, and that is exactly fitting in the time that I've been allotted. Thank you very much for your attention here.
Thank you, Roland. Are there any questions?
What was the most surprising source of unreproducibility that you discovered?
The nicest thing that I found was the one that somehow fonts get embedded into the initial RAM disk, just for Plymouth, for having the nice splash screen. And that used the truly random global unique identifier, and I had really some fun hacking this LD preload to ensure that the function that generates it was replaced by something that I wrote, which is based on source date epoch, of course, and then just counting up request 1, request 2. That was the most fun I had. Everything else was rather simple, like placing a copy minus preserve timestamps instead of doing a regular copy. Yep.
Maybe I didn't get it in the talk, but you answered it already. But how much of the solutions you had to implement for the reproducible image build are now part of the live image tooling, and how much is kind of generically solved? So if I'm doing a different kind of imaging, how much do I have to still rethink about what you've already solved, or look up what you've solved and how you solved it, and how much is now solved, let's say, in the package or in some other tooling there?
So the live build source code is hosted on Salsa, and I work there directly. So I was able to do merge requests, and everything is upstreamed. And Biluka also, when I say please do so, will package it for me and prepare a new upload. So everything is nowadays in Debian SID and then progressing towards.
But in the live imaging tool.
In the live build tool. But the live build tool is just a collection, of shell scripts, and it's copy this, copy that. It's a small subset. If you want to do that as well, I invite you to take a peek at that, and it's most of them is trivial, and then there is this folder called hooks, and there are the special nifty things going on. But most of the time it is about doing bookkeeping, making sure your copy commands are okay. If you do a make ms.fs for example, your VFATs, which you require for your AFI, use something as a command line option to make it with a reproducible timestamp in there. Yeah. Okay. So it's not everything regarding reproducible at this stage is not complicated, truly complicated anymore. It actually has, in the past it has been to convince the packages to contain this environment variable, but now that it is in there, just use it and you benefit from that.
Okay. Okay.
Are there any other questions? Well, I guess that's it for now then. Thanks again, Roland. And we'll up for a short break of 45 minutes, I think, and then we'll back here again.
Thank you.